All right. There we are. All right. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Our guest speaker today is Sarah Anderson, who is the Heritage Diet Curriculum Manager for the nonprofit organization Oldways, an organization that I have followed quite literally for years and whose work I have been just incredibly impressed with. Sarah graduated from Lesley University with a bachelor's degree in global studies, where she completed a semester abroad in Granada, Spain. Sarah joined Oldways in June of 2020 as the Heritage Diet Curriculum Coordinator. Her responsibilities include managing partnership relationships by providing support and data tracking for the African and Latin American Heritage Diet programs. As Oldways Heritage Diet's Curriculum Manager, Sarah empowers instructors and organizations to implement culturally relevant nutrition education. In her free time, she likes to cook and read and volunteer. She also has a passion for traveling around the world to new places. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Sarah Anderson.
Thanks. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So let me just pull up my PowerPoint slides so we can get ready. And so sorry in advance, I always have so many tabs open on my computer. So let's get this pulled up. And also let me share my screen.
And for everybody in the room, you can turn your cameras on so she can see you and we can see each other.
Okay, perfect. Can you just see the regular screen here?
We can.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for inviting me today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Anderson. I'm the Heritage Diets Curriculum Manager. My primary focus is on the African Heritage and Health Program and the Latin American Heritage Program through Oldways nonprofit. So super excited to talk about the African Heritage Program today, especially for our, during Black History Month. But let's start with a little bit about myself. I grew up in Houston, Texas, attended, school out in the Harris County area. And what brought me out to Boston, which is where Lesley and Oldways is located, was being accepted into Lesley, going to school there. And what got me into the nutrition field that you're probably wondering is global studies was my background. So essentially, when you're thinking about global studies, you're understanding and learning about different, regions of focus. And one way that I love to learn about different traditions and cultures is through food and nutrition, because food is a way of bringing people together. And so that's actually how Oldways came a part of my journey, because, we have our heritage diets, which bring together my passions of food, cultures, and traditions. And through food, we can understand how landscape, society, and language bring together and come together to describe a dish. So that's just a little bit about me and how I got connected with Oldways. But let me tell you a little bit more about Oldways by going through the next couple of slides. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Oldways, we're a nonprofit dedicating to improving public health by inspiring individuals and organizations to embrace the healthy, sustainable joys of old ways eating. Our heritage-based diets are not only high in taste, they're also great in nourishment, sustainability, and simply joy. We're most well known for our creation of the Mediterranean Diet Pyramid, which was in partnership with the Harvard Public School of Health. And we are also known for the whole grain stamp, which if you're at any of your local grocery stores and you're looking at some whole grains products, you'll see a stamp that is approved through the Whole Grains Council. And we're a part of the Whole Grains Council that gets some of those products at your local grocery stores approved. We're also known, of course, for the heritage diets. I primarily focus on the African heritage and the Latin American heritage, although we are starting to expand on our Mediterranean diet heritage, where we're also offer cooking classes. And then we also have our Asian heritage diet, and we have our vegan and vegetarian diet. On top of that, we also have our plant forward plates. We're, like I said, a part of the Whole Grains Council. We're a part of the Cheese Coalition. And lastly, we offer travel culinaria. So you can travel with Oldways around the world, go behind the scenes, visit farms, meet with the chefs, and essentially just learn more about food. So we're a ton of foodies here at Oldways. So, oh, and as far as like our mission, just inspiring people to eat the healthy, sustainable joys of Oldways eating. And that photo that you see there is actually one of our local ambassadors out in Boston. She's currently the chef in residence at Boston Public Library, and she's been cooking with us for years. Her name's Gloria Fernandez. So as we go through these slides, there'll be photos. Usually they are familiar faces of Oldways and, partners that have worked with us for many years. So these are our heritage diet pyramids that you see here. We to develop these heritage diet pyramids, for each pyramid there's a committee. So with the African heritage pyramid, which shows on this graphic here, but I'll show you the faces of the committee. We usually have committees that are reflective of each of their heritage that came together to develop the program. So, for instance, within the Asian Heritage Diet Pyramid, those advisory board committees are all of that heritage. And same for our Mediterranean diet and our African heritage and our Latin American heritage. So the reason why we choose a pyramid is that, a, it's less of a strict diet. It's a lot more inclusive versus a plate. And so the way you want to follow a pyramid is usually primarily focusing all your the base of your meals and your food towards the bottom of the pyramid. And then as you move upward, you'll want smaller portions a part of your plate. As you'll notice at the bottom of each of our heritage diet pyramids, there's always that physical activity. And when you're thinking about the old ways of living, our ancestors had very active lives. And so it's really important to try to incorporate simple movements, walking, jogging, dancing, marching, just something that gets the blood flowing, because that's really just good for your health. And then as you move further up, there's always those fruits and vegetables that are featured that you want to have the star of your plate within each of your meals. And one thing that we like to talk about, when we're thinking about food is that food is meant to be shared and so is good health. So when you're thinking about your dinner table, try to think of it as the healing table, a place where, you, family, friends can come together and just share beautiful meals and just reinforce that healthy lifestyle together because food brings us together. So now let's go over how each of the heritage diet pyramids were developed. Um, I won't go into too much detail since we have limited time, but I'll just give a little bit of insight. So Oldways started in 1990. John Gifford was the man behind the vision of Oldways. And it was essentially our mission was just to promote traditional foods, their agricultural practices, their sustainability within the nutrition field, and preparations and their healthfulness. So around the 1990s, there was a lot of fat-free, zero sugar, zero fat trends going on. And Oldways was one of those, we were one of those communities where we're like, wait a minute, there's healthy fats, you've got your omega-3s, you've got even your nuts and seeds, which I'll talk about later, but those have a lot of fat. So they're healthy fats. You don't need to remove fats to have a healthy diet. And so that kind of was one of the first trends or, just things that we wanted to debunk here at Oldways. So right after that, of course, just bringing a bunch of nutritionists together, we developed the Mediterranean diet, which is our first diet pyramid. This was developed in 1992, and it was in response to the USDA's dietary pyramid, which was criticized for its questionable nutrition science. Oldways, along with the World Health Organization, collaborated with the Harvard School of Public Health and initiated the Public Health Implications of Traditional Diets conferences. And these gatherings essentially started in 1993 and involved experts like Walter Willett and Ansel Keys, leading to the creation of the first Mediterranean diet pyramid. And beyond theory, this was the start of the travel culinarias, where essentially the goal was to bring doctors, nutrition scientists, medical journalists, and cookbook authors to the Mediterranean to introduce them to healthy eating habits. Therefore, we can bring those back to the United States. And I'll try to go quicker with the other ones. And so the next one was the Asian Heritage Diet, which was in 1995. And the Asian Heritage Diet Pyramid, actually, when we got together, the committee members, it was at an international conference on the diets of Asia that was in San Francisco. And it was developed with the Cornell China Oxford project and the Harvard School of Public Health. So it was a joint collaboration. This pyramid for our Asian heritage draws inspiration from rich traditions, religious practices of Asian countries. It emphasizes vegetables, strong spices, noodles, rice, seafood, and soy products. So now going to the next development of the heritage pyramid, and that's the Latin American heritage diet. This was introduced in 1996. It was at a conference in El Paso, Texas. And so we met advisory board members there. And then a decade later, actually in 2005, we gathered again at a Latin American Diet Summit in Mexico City to examine the science behind the pyramid, because there was bringing the pyramid together, but also understanding the implications and, the evidence-basedness of the pyramid. And so the graphics were essentially updated again in 2009 to better show the abundance and deliciousness of Latin American foods. And then we also recently updated the Latin American heritage, not the pyramid, but the entire curriculum, because it's always been available in both English and Spanish translations, but we wanted to get it re-professionally translated again with a Harvard professor that we trust. So um, it is, although it's technically older than our African heritage, we treat it like our newer heritage diet just because it's had more significant amount of updates, but now it's just beautiful and we're so excited to move forward with it. So lastly is the African heritage diet. This one was developed very differently compared to all the other ones where it's like we've met at a conference. With our African heritage diet, it was actually from a huge grant that we received from Walmart Foundation. And with that grant, we were able to seek out the advisory board committee that we thought would be great to collaborate on the African Heritage Diet Pyramid, serving as the, foundational framework for two of our programs within that are connected to the pyramid. So there's the Taste of African Heritage and there's the Children's Taste of African Heritage, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. But essentially, this is the first Heritage Diet Pyramid where we created cooking classes, so a 6-week and a 7-week curriculum from it. And it's centered around, plant-based foods rooted in the diverse African diaspora. And what's nice about this pyramid too is just the advisory board member that we were able to, with generous funding from this grant, to put together. And also, whenever you're working with grants, they usually have a requirement of, data collection and pilot sites. So this was one where it was developed in 2000 and what was it, 2011, but just within that same year, we already needed to have pilot sites out. So we had 15 pilot sites nationwide by 2012 for the curriculum that was developed within the same year, ideally. So it was a great grant, but it definitely kept us moving with the African Heritage and Health program. So I know I've talked a little bit about all our heritage diets. I'm going to share a little video that just gives you a little insight of what to expect and a little more about our African Heritage and Health program. This was filmed by, I believe it is one of our other ambassadors out in Houston, Janessa, and then also one of the advisory board members who does a lot of agriculture and food policy work out in Washington, D.C., Tamara Ray Stevenson. She also owns a nonprofit, Wanda, and she's been featured in a couple of cookbooks. So this was before all of that, when she was, just essentially really getting started and working with Oldways. And that's what's cool about some of our heritage diets is that we got to work with some of the amazing individuals before they are doing the projects that they're working on now. So it's really cool to have them just a part of our network. I'll start the video. It's just a couple of minutes.
This is more than just about food. It really is about shaping people's identity and how they see themselves through their food, how they see their culture being a part of their health solution. The Taste of African Heritage and Health program is for anyone, whether it's been trying to lose weight, improve their health, lacking cooking skills, don't know other creative ways, enhance their meals in their homes. The research really does show that when we eat a more traditional heritage diet that we improve our health outcomes, and I think that's really the core of what Oldways is about and what it's doing in terms of helping the community. This program now with the Taste of African Heritage and Health.
African Heritage Diet Pyramid was created with a committee of nutrition scientists, experts in culinary history and African American foodways.
It's much easier to do because you can identify with that. I know what greens are, and so I can identify with eat a lot of this. You can have the brown rice and the millet and you know the barley. You have all of these healthy whole grains here.
And those kinds of grains that really is a part of the heritage that needs to be built upon. On top of that, the tubers, the healthy starches from the yams to the sweet potatoes, and then you have the balance of fruits that will come from everything from the tropical fruits like the papayas, the melons, the mangoes, the pineapples, the bananas, plantains, and them serving as really desserts compared to what we traditionally have now.
Once you sort of shift your mindset to looking at your plate as more of a heritage plate, it's going to redefine everything that you can put on there. So when you look at a plate now and you say, that should have some whole grains, or that should have and beans, and my greens, and my vegetables, fruit for dessert.
And it's so empowering. This idea of connecting to your heritage and improving your health through connecting to your heritage.
In the Taste of African Heritage and Health program, we evaluate how the students are going through the process and what lessons that we can learn to improve the program and what it has meant for their life and for their family, and most of all, how they have improved their health.
So my name is Danessa Bowling. I live in Houston. I am actually on my 4th series of the class. I committed myself to do this for a full year. So it was a time of a serious transition for me. And so at this point, I had lost my mom, my grandmother, and my aunt to cancer. It's like, okay, being realistic, I'm overweight, I'm at risk for diabetes, yeah, I'm African American. I just didn't know what to do. I can't control cancer, I can't control heart disease, I can't control diabetes. I can control this. This is my thing I can do. And so I thought, well, I'll do it and I'll teach it and it'll help me. Is in addition to teaching and learning and eating healthy, you get this sense of community with people.
This idea of culture being a part of your medicine. We talk about cultural competency, but we never really see the integration of culture in the form of community programs. And the Taste of African Heritage and Health program does the very thing that the community has been longing for, and why it's being embraced so much more than ever, and why it's so desperately needed.
I believe that this can be the thing that could bring people together, where we could break down some barriers that we never thought could be broken down with food.
The idea of our culture and our community, they both are tied into our cuisine, can be a part of our medicine, our nutrition. That's what this program provides more than ever.
Right. Well, yeah, that was just a video overview for the program. And yeah, it's always nice to rewatch it and just looking back, because it's like if you saw one of our ambassadors now, Danessa, she looks amazing. She's been teaching it for so many years, and she's not only does it bring people together, when facing social isolation from the pandemic, or just, cooking classes that, foster a source of community, but, adding these healthy habits to your daily eating practices, you really do see the benefits even on your body. And, we have our heritage diets, but something that I think is really interesting with Oldways, with our, African heritage, our Latin, just our heritage diets in general, is that you will see, we have done studies and you will see the benefits and weight loss connected with it, but that's not really what we focus on or advertise predominantly, because essentially our goal is about, these foodways being sustainable and focusing on their the nutritional value that you're receiving. But that's something that just happens to be an added bonus when you're actually taking the time to listen to your hunger cues and eat right, and physical activity and doing what's good for your body. So Danessa, like I said, she was in the video, but she has lost so much weight, and she's just been like she was one of our pilot instructors and has been with the program since its early development. And it's just really cool to see, being a part of the instructor's journey. So talking a little bit more about the African Heritage program. So the first one that was created was our Taste of African Heritage. It's a 6-week cooking class curricula, and it brings together the common threads and foodways of African American ancestors. What's nice about this diet is it recognizes the distinct flavors and traditions of the 4 major regions of the African diaspora. So you'll see West and Central Africa, the American South, the Caribbean islands, and South America, as far as, information incorporated within the curriculum. And like I said, we have our 6-week adults, A Taste of African Heritage, and our 7 weeks children's. And you just have that blend within the curriculum of cultural history paired with delicious cooking techniques. And it's also just going to talk about that nutritional value that you get within each of the recipes. And our motto and connection with our African Heritage and Health program in general is, by reclaiming our heritage, we can reclaim our health. And so when I say that all the recipes are 100% plant-based, that means that you won't see any meat or dairy embedded within the curriculum. Although on Oldways website, we have a plethora of free recipes there, a full glossary. And those do include some meat dishes, but also the reason why is because we still want to honor the heritage in the dishes to those countries and regions of focus. For instance, you'll see chicken yassa there, and that's a very popular Senegalese dish. So, that we can't remove it from the website, or, it's not something we'd want to remove, because it would be, removing that sense of heritage to that country. So, we still have it on the website, but just not embedded within the curriculum. But we do have another Senegalese dish that, if we have time, maybe I can show a cooking demo of. Oh, and something that's also nice to mention within the curriculum is that not only is it, delicious and nutritious, but it also meets the guidelines that healthcare professionals promote today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. And from the graphic there, these are just the 6 lessons that you see included within the Adults African Heritage curriculum. So these are the faces of our African Heritage and Health Advisory Board Committee. They are culinary historians, nutrition scientists, public health experts, and they all have a focus on African descended health and history. And today they continue their expertise. If you have heard of the magazine Cook's Country, Toni Tipton Martin there is the editor-in-chief, and she also has plenty of cookbooks. Jubilee is definitely one of my favorites, because her cookbooks are just really beautiful, and they're kind of like they're just like a bunch of references to older cookbooks and African descendant, like just chefs. And so she really plays a good, acknowledgement and just connection within those recipes of tracing the foodways in our history to back to our ancestors and the original dish that they were inspired by. So she's one of our advisory board members. There's also Dr. Jessica B. Harris there. And if you've seen, there's a Netflix docu-series called High on the Hog. It's based on her book, and she's also one of our advisory board members. We've got a couple of professors there from HBCUs. We've got Tambra there. So these are just some of the faces that came together to develop this program. So this symbol here, it's used a lot within the Oldways curriculum, especially within the children's. It's actually on the front cover of our children's curriculum, and it's the Sankofa bird, or the Sankofa symbol. It symbolizes bringing the best of the old ways forward, and it perfectly captures the spirit of the African heritage diet. In addition to the bird Sankofa, there's also the heart Sankofa that you'll see throughout the materials. And it's essentially, just talking about to go back and take and bring the best forward. So you'll see that embedded in the curriculum, but also now that you know what this means when you see it other places, just a little food for thought. Now, what is the African diaspora? So when we're talking about the four major regions that, are included in the curriculum, well, first let's back it up to what the diaspora means. So the diaspora means the dispersal or scattering of a group of people from their original homeland. So therefore, when you're thinking of the African diaspora, you can tell that it is defined as the geopolitical areas where people of African descent have resided after involuntary removal from Africa. So what's nice is the African heritage diet, and when I say this, it's not just Oldways, it's just when you're generally thinking of the African heritage diet, it is meant to celebrate those eating practices and food and cuisines of the following regions. So what I like about this graphic here is it really visualizes some of the routes that were taken that show and also some of the ingredients or produce that was brought over and how it traveled about. And something that isn't much spoken about when you're thinking about the African diaspora is that it also includes parts of Central America, Canada, Great Britain, Pakistan, and India. And reasons why you got to think about places where large populations of African descendants settled post-enslavement. So just as people moved throughout the world to create the African diaspora, so did their food. And, that's why when you're thinking of just African foodways, you can't just think of food only from Africa. You got to follow the people too. And what's nice is that, well, not nice, but this is something that also to take into consideration is that food traveled through these ways too. Food was transported along these routes from Africa and introduced to these regions, but also there's that connection of when, for instance, when the Portuguese came over to West and Central Africa, which I'll talk about later in another slide, they introduced crops to the West African region too. But along the voyage, there were seeds. Some women would braid seeds in their hair, and that's how okra was brought into the Americas. And it was just a way of preservation of food traditions, techniques, recipes. And a lot of what you don't see in this chart is not only the storage of how these ingredients moved about, but also the agricultural knowledge that was shared. And so it's just, history is still very much alive and important, and you'll actually even see it today in American foodways of how this was impacted through the transatlantic slave trade. And so, yeah, as far as some of a couple of more things to note that you would see being transported around this time. And on the ships, a lot of the people ate rice, beans, corn, yams, widely with lemons, limes, and vegetables occasionally, and even meat, but that was rarely a part of the diet in transport, but you would see it. There are studies that show that it was there occasionally. So when we're thinking of, the African diaspora, a lot of people focus on, the West and Central, but there's also the East African trade. And, also it's best to understand that Africa is a continent, not a country. It's extremely diverse, both culturally and geographically. There are 54 countries in Africa and over 1,500 different languages. It's the second largest continent. Size-wise, you could fit the United States, most of China, and India in the continent with room for leftover. So with all that understood, you could tell that the culinary diversity of Africa has been shaped through geography, climate, trade, and cultural influences for many, many centuries. And some of the foods, and this is just off the top of my head, from this side is you've got the teff, you've got the curries, you've got the lentils, you've got the injera. And so you will also, when you're going on this side of the African continent, you will really get to see how the foodways has been shaped by these routes. Perfect. So now, just breaking up the four regions a little more, just giving a bit of examples of things that maybe you'll see at your grocery store that now when you look at them, it's like, okay, I can connect it to this region and understand how it's part of the African heritage diet. So some of my favorite seasonings that just remind me of, West and Central Africa and African heritage when we're thinking about that specific region is harissa. If you've tried that before, it's almost like a paprika. It's got a little spice to it. Oh, it's one of my favorites. There's the grains of paradise. It's got like a peppery note to it. For beer is also a really good one. And these are just a couple of seasonings when we're thinking about like West and Central Africa. You've also got, and this is embedded within the curriculum as far as dishes. You've got mafe, which is a Senegalese stew. You've got red, which is a black-eyed pea and okra Ghana-based stew. You've got chicken yassa, which you'll see over in Senegalese. And if you like street food, or if you ever see this when you're out and about, I totally recommend you try it. It's called akara, and it's a black-eyed pea fritters, and they're based from West Africa, and they're just really delicious. We actually have a recipe featuring them on Oldways' website. Now, when you're thinking of the American South, as we're all in the United States, so you probably can already start to think of culinary influences. So, what's something that maybe you have in your pantry? Creole seasoning. You've got that from the American South. You've also got Gullah Geechee. So, this is out towards, the Carolinas, Atlanta, out towards that area. And it's really cool because you just see a lot of seafood influences. You've got the Carolina gold rice, which was, shaped by enslaved Africans that needed to work with agricultural practices and bring that together to cultivate that rice. And so that is just, those are just some of the few examples that when you're thinking of African foodways within the American South, and plenty of more, because I mean, when you're thinking of Southern cuisine, the chefs that were in the kitchen were primarily of African descent. So of course that's going to have an impact on, Southern foodways. But I definitely recommend you to do some additional reading, and we have plenty of resources that we can point you to at Oldways. So if you ever have any questions on just books about American Southern foodways and that influence, feel free to email me. Now, when we're thinking about the Caribbean islands, they're islands, so they're surrounded by water. So what do you think? You're gonna get a lot of seafood, but also it's really cool is you've got a lot of peppery dishes because there's so much native peppers that are growing there. My favorite when I'm thinking of a seasoning is like a good jerk seasoning. When I'm thinking of teas there, I'm thinking of sorrel or maybe like a hibiscus tea. There's plenty of peas and tubers. So one of the things I love to talk about within the Caribbean islands is provisions. So this is just a makeup of root vegetables, tubers, corns, and it's just a staple within Caribbean cooking. It's all cooked together, these root vegetables, and they're just very savory and delicious. What's also cool is that, within the American South, you see a lot of more like rice and beans, and also, especially in South America, a lot of rice and beans dishes. Whereas within the Caribbean islands, you'll see like rice and kidney beans, but what you'll see even more is rice and peas. So that's just something that, you know, same similar dish, but slightly different variations. So that's how you know that our people were there. So now with the South America, uh, as already informed, so they have a lot of rice-based soups and stews paired with usually chicken, seafood, meat, vegetables. When you're thinking of the rice and bean dishes, you'll see a lot of black beans, pinto beans, red beans, and lentils. They also have an influx of delicate greens like watercress or callaloo, along with okra, peanuts, squashes, plantains that are widely used. Also, you see a ton of tropical fruits, just like you would in the Caribbean islands. But what's cool is with the within South America, you've got the guavas, mangoes, cashews, and then there's plenty of seafood stews. Like in Brazil, one of their most popular stews is it's like this fish stew. It's called moqueca, and it has shrimp, it's got fish, it's got tomato, it's got palm oil, it's got coconut milk, and it's just delicious. And what's nice too is, there's just, of course, a variety of fishes that you'll also see embedded within the cuisine. So you've got snapper, which you'll also see over in West Africa. You've got the mahi mahi, and then you've got a lot of dried fish, like salt fish that are used within the ingredients. And then you also see, of course, root vegetables like cassava, yuca, yams, avocados, pineapple, cilantro, tapioca. So that's just a little bit of a flavor profile for the South America. And if this is getting you hungry, I apologize in advance because it's only going to get worse from here. So, I think one really good way of understanding the African heritage diet and following these regions is looking for the similarities within these regions of focus. Therefore, you can start to make these connections and understand how certain dishes are connected with each other. For instance, one of my favorite ones is um, jambalaya that you'll see out in Louisiana. Its closest kin or its relative is actually jollof rice, which is a West African dish. So, understanding how some of these dishes are connected to other dishes, bring together and really paint that picture of the movement of people and them being within this new geography, this new area, and having to, from what the knowledge they already know, using what's around them to make something familiar. And so finding those similarities is a really good way to trace the food ways of people. So you'll see a lot of, those rice and bean dishes throughout the diaspora. And then, nut seeds featured also incorporated because you see a lot of nuts and seeds, especially like within stews from West Africa, and then seafood within fishing communities, which, sounds very, which you'll see all over too. When you're thinking of drinks, there's the fermented drinks. So, what was that? Yes, sorghum. This was a recent dish, another recipe that we added to the website. But in West Africa, you'll see like a sorghum beer. And so they use this whole grain, it's fermented, and it's just another drink that's very popular. And so, when you're looking at teas, you're thinking of sorrel, you're thinking of hibiscus, you're thinking of other teas too that you will see from various regions that have that similarity. And something that I think is also really cool within the African heritage diet is that fruits are very plentiful, but almost so much that they're eaten even more as a dessert. You see a lot of fruits as just like a treat. So if you're thinking about the American South and you're like, what fruits do we have, within the African heritage diet? I can name a couple. Pineapple upside down cake, um, mango papaya after chop if you're, from the Caribbean islands. Um, so those are just the top of my head because, oh, well, sweet potato pie. So, but there's a lot of fruits that are actually used as desserts that you'll see incorporated within the cuisine too. So that's just another similarity. And also those root vegetables that just make up really healthy and starchy staples within the heritage diets. So now I'm going to show you the our plate of expressions. These are graphics that were created for specifically for our African heritage curriculum. And what's nice is that it's nice to have plates because plates are important too. They are, the well-balanced plates are more than just like one dish. A healthy plate that you see within each of these is usually heaped with vegetables, whole grains, maybe a little bit of fish, maybe a little bit of beans. And these, when you're looking at these plates, they look pretty balanced, right? Like it's not like you see a giant ribeye steak taking over the whole plate with no sides or maybe a side of mashed potatoes. You've got color in here. You've got the vegetables. So from the African region, the West and Central Africa, you've got a peanut stew at the top. You've got a jollof rice with black eyed peas, and then you've got that chicken yassa within the Caribbean region. And these are just some popular dishes. You've got a hearty pumpkin stew. You've got red beans and rice with a light coconut milk and sauteed spinach. You've got grilled red snapper with mango and a cilantro lime vinaigrette and some green beans. And so within the American South, you've got the shrimp gumbo, you've got the hoppin' johns, you've got the braised collard greens, you've got the cabbage slaw, you've got the pecan crusted baked catfish and the sweet potato and okra corn mix-up. And within South America, you've got the black beans and rice with the hearts of palm salad, you've got the vegetable and rice soup, you've also got that fish soup I was referencing earlier with the watercress salad. So these are just graphics that were created from some just really popular dishes throughout the region that kind of paint the picture for you. And this is also a resource we have on our website for each of our heritage diets, but essentially it's just common foods and flavors. So if you're like, where do I get started? What are some ingredients or how can I start getting my pantry kitchen set up for these things? You know, within the African heritage diet, but also just within the continent of Africa, there are so many whole grains. So I always like to say, for me, I found it easiest to start with whole grains because you really get introduced to some cool things outside of just having rice. Millet is delicious, sorghum, you've got fonio, you've got couscous. And so switching over to whole grains because it actually has a lot more nutritional value and trying out some of these to get introduced. And then also leafy greens. The next slide, I'll talk about leafy greens, but there are tons of leafy greens within the African heritage diet. So that's a good way. But these are just some ideas to, get the brain flowing. And this resource is perfectly free and available through our website. So you could check it out anytime. Great. So now talking about greens, this is one of my favorite lesson plans within the curriculum. Just because essentially greens are kind of all the rage these days. They've gained so much popularity now when you go to the grocery store. There used to be only like lettuce and spinach, and now you just see a variety of so many different greens from chard, kale, and it's really fun and exciting to see. Uh, there's just also within greens that I think isn't discussed enough is that there's just a wide range of flavors from spicy to bitter to mild. And within Afro-Caribbean and South American cooking, They usually stick to more milder tasting greens that grow in the tropics. So when you're thinking of that, you're thinking of like spinach, whereas when you're going to some of those hardier greens like collards, mustard, or dandelion, those continue to be more popular within African American foodways. And you'll notice that because usually when in the American South, when we're cooking with greens, it's we're cooking them down. So it's like in a large pot, maybe it's with some ham hock or bacon, or it's with a type of protein, but it's being cooked down. And just a little bit of history with collard greens, they're actually Northern European in origin. Collard comes from colewort, which means any non-heading cabbage. So that's just a little background with collard greens. And I think what's really cool just about greens in general is that, people of African heritage have been cooking with them for centuries. In West African alone, there are more than 150 different types of edible greens, and there's a word for it. It's called EFO, so EFO, and it's used to refer to all the different kinds of leafy greens. So Africans brought their love for greens to the Americas, and it was here in Southern plantation cooking that that familiar American way of eating greens, slow cooked for hours and flavored with salted pork, fatback, or ham hock, is how it got started. Now, benefits of it, there are plenty. Many experts say that greens are the number one food you can just eat regularly to help improve your health. From the 2015 to the 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans, they recommend that folks of all ages eat more dark green vegetables, and they also recommend a daily consumption of greens within the African Heritage Program that brings just a flood of nourishment to our bodies because greens are high in nutrients. They're packed with fiber, they've got iron, they've got calcium, plenty of vitamins, and it just keeps your body running at its best. Just 1 cup of greens is more than a day's worth of vitamins and nutrients. And something cool within the curriculum is there's actually a word for when you cook down the greens and you save that liquid. It's called a pot liquor. And it was used by, African American ancestors to keep stay healthy. That was their vitamins. It was cooking down their greens and stirring that juice or the liquids from that to gain the nutrients from those greens. So essentially, there's plenty of benefits to them. They give our bodies a tune-up, powerful in nutrients, and also they're really good for our digestive system. They help us digest and absorb other foods. And also, it increases the healthy stomach acids that break down the nutrients from other foods that we get from greens. I can't stop talking about greens, but essentially, good for blood circulation, lungs, and our respiratory system, digestion, kidneys, and then here are just many different types of greens that you see listed there, but we have a whole lesson plan on it, and I could genuinely just keep talking about it. So I'll switch over to whole grains for time's sake. So, whole grains are, provide key vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fibers that are essential to good health. Adding whole grains to your diet can significantly lower our risk of chronic diseases such as a stroke, diabetes, heart disease, inflammatory diseases, and high blood pressure, and even some cancer. And at one time in traditional diets, most of all grains, so our ancestors, the way that they ate grains were whole grains. The difference that you'll see now, for instance, like with white rice, is that the nutritional value has been stripped from the grain. It's actually those outer layers that I believe it's like the bran that contains most of the nutritional value. So there are a lot of people in the field now that are, scientists and nutrition scientists that are trying to bring those nutrients back to our whole grains and reintroducing some of those once extinct whole grains, especially from the African region, back into the diets of West Africans, but also introducing them to the Americas. So something that I love to say is, did you know that Africa has more native grains than any other continent? It has its own species of rice, along with millet, barley, sorghum, teff, and several varieties of wheat, and dozens of other wild grains. Many traditional African heritage meals incorporated grains and other starchy mashes paired with stews, spices, and vegetables. When you're thinking of millet, rice, fonio, barley, teff, injera, sorghum, couscous, these were just favorite forms of local grains that were eaten, usually as a bed of stewed vegetables on top, or they were incorporated into porridges, fritters, or flatbreads. So injera, you'll see that within the flatbreads. Something that, is not so good, but, just gotta share is that, trade with Portugal and the Portuguese coming over to not only the Americas, but the West Africa region, is that they introduced corn to that region. And so, or maize. And so this crop eventually just became so popular that it took place of many local whole grains that were already being eaten by the locals. So unfortunately, both native and new grains were not in popularity, so weren't being produced as much. And so now which had a negative impact on the health of native Africans within those regions. So that's why you see now, and just this whole new movement of scientists working hard to get those traditional whole grains back into the diets and reintroducing those. My favorite example of this is if you've heard of fonio. Pierre Tom is a chef, but also just a whole grains amazing person, just like advocate. And he's reintroducing fonio back into the market, and it's so cool because it's this drought resistant crop and just a lot of nutritional value to it. And if you see it at your grocery store, I recommend giving it a try. It's kind of similar to couscous, but it's even smaller. So it's really good at like absorbing the juices if you're just making a dish where you're like, I could use rice, but with something else that'll give it a little bit more of a nuttier flavor. So next is a fun fact with rice. So, and this is, primarily within the American South. Rice, as we know and love it today, was actually popularized in South Carolina in the 1700s. Many people don't know is that South Carolina's rice success was almost entirely thanks to West African female slaves. The landowners in the American South did not know how to cultivate rice, but West African women were experts at it. So these women knew how to find the right soil, how to irrigate the land specifically for rice, and then how to grow the crop, process, and cook the rice. They used a mortar and pestle, which is a tool used to crush down the ingredients to process the rice in a way that kept the bran layer and germ intact. And they used a special fanned basket for winnowing, or essentially separating the rice from its outer casting. And that was a way of, just agriculture for the rice out there. So this basket here is, when finding graphics for it, there are so many different ones. Some of them, like the side of it looks a bit more flat, almost like rectangular, where you feel like the rice could spill out. But that's the point. You're supposed to kind of the hand movement. So then the rice is going out and it's being separated from that outer layer when working with it. So definitely recommend looking it up, but this is just a graphic that we could find that seemed kind of similar to what we were looking for. Great. So you're probably asking why culturally relevant nutrition education. These are some of my favorite quotes I love to share. This one's from Oldways, of course, but no matter what your ancestry is, tapping into your heritage, celebrating important cultural links to family food can help motivate you to change and reclaim good health. And also another quote from Michelle Obama is, "Food can be a symbol of cultural identity. It knits families together." So, as far as health benefits of switching to a traditional diet like our African heritage diet, there improved markers of cancer, reduced inflammation, and gut microbiome. You're providing, when providing culturally relevant, appropriate interventions, it's really a lot more sustainable within Black communities. And also just the culturally sensitive modifications to diets can lead to improvements in blood pressure, weight, and other health parameters. So these are stats and results that we received specifically from our A Taste of African Heritage curriculum. In adults, systolic blood pressure decreased by an average of 4.65 millimeters of mercury over the 6-week program, and 90% of adult participants improved at least one healthy eating behavior, whether that's eating more whole grains, vegetables, fruits. And participants significantly increased weekly intakes of fruits, vegetables, and greens, and weekly exercise frequencies, because the curriculum asks you to examine how often you are not only intaking fruits, vegetables, and greens, but also your physical fitness. So these are just some additional stats from the program. And also, this is from essentially from the journal that we published out in 2022. But participants from the program also noticed, just 98% reported health being a motivator for eating and living well. And also there was a decreased weight and waist circumference and blood pressure, because that's one of the things we measure through our health measurement surveys that are incorporated within the curriculum. So these are sorry about that. These are a couple of the journals that we did in collaboration with some of our university partners and just partners in general. So we have the what is it? The recent journal that focuses on all of our heritage diets, and then the impacts one that focuses primarily on the successes of our African heritage diet. These are free and available for the general public, and they're also published on our website too. So you could always check those out and learn more about data that we've collected from the African Heritage Diet Program, because there's not a lot of academic research done on well, not enough, if you ask me, and not enough done. And so that is our goal, is really getting that information out there. And what was cool is from these journals is we were included in the SNAP-Ed toolkit, and we're also part of the SNAP-Ed library. So when you're thinking of culturally relevant nutrition education and its evidence-based effectiveness being incorporated in these government programs, really shines light on why culturally relevant nutrition education is important, significant, and sustainable. So having that evidence-based background is really good for not just our program, but just in general when you're thinking of the Mediterranean diet versus the African heritage diet and other heritage diet. It's opening those pathways. Now, when we're thinking of, let's see here. So how are we doing on time, James? I want to ask.
We're good. We are good.
Okay.
We've got 6 more minutes.
Okay, perfect. So now when we're thinking of will I get enough is a question I like to ask as far as nutrients. Most proteins and calcium in a typical American diet comes from animal sources like meat or milk, but vegan diets, which are entirely plant-based, uh, exclude all of those animal products. So you won't see any meat, dairy, or eggs or seafood. So when you're thinking of the vegan diet, you can still get those nutrients if well planned through plant-based eating. So here's just a quick overview, because a lot of people worry about not getting enough protein, but there are a lot of protein in actually legumes and beans. So, just to name a few from the African heritage diet, you've got your black eyed peas, you've got your black beans, your lentils, your kidney beans. your peanut butters, your almonds. So our nuts, seeds, beans, they have a lot of protein. Doesn't that rhyme? So, also when you're thinking of like calcium, so traditional diets may not meet calcium recommendations, but US guidelines are often higher than those in other countries. So most people, essentially those of African and East African descent, may struggle with lactose digestion just because you don't see a lot of dairy within the diet. And so fortunately, you can still make up for that with calcium from plant sources, from leafy greens, or plant-based milks that are fortified with calcium. So these are just other ways that you can incorporate that within your diet. And teff there is a another whole grain. So now when we're thinking of iron, um, so animal foods contain heme iron, while plant foods have a non-heme iron, which is usually harder to absorb. But there's been many studies that show our bodies can actually, when we're doing more of the plant iron, is that our bodies will adapt to absorb more non-heme iron more effectively over time. So it's just about getting yourself started if you're switching over to a plant-based diet, moving from a heme iron to a non-heme iron. It's something that the body will just need time to adapt to, but it is a natural process. And, also just suggest working with a healthcare profession to make sure that you're being safe when making a drastic switch. And it's also good to um, not shock your body. So do it, with supervision. Um, so vitamin B12, this is also another vitamin that's found in a lot of animal foods, but some vegan products like cereals and nutritional yeast are fortified with it, and many dietitians recommend that B12 supplements should be taken for vegans, and it's also important to consult with, a doctor or a dietitian to understand the right choice that works best for you. And when you're thinking about vitamin D, our bodies actually produce vitamin D from sun exposure. While dairy is often fortified with vitamin D, many plant foods such as cereals and plant milks are also fortified with vitamin D. And certain mushrooms grown under UV light can provide vitamin D too. And omega-3 fatty acids, commonly found in salmon, but are also present in foods like walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds, which can easily be added to your meals. Okay, perfect. So now we're going over to meal swaps. So when we're thinking about plant-based diets, not all vegan diets are necessarily healthy. After all, you've got Oreos and potato chips that are technically vegan. So what's the difference between a healthy vegan diet and an unhealthy diet? And that's where you understand, in order to be nutritionally balanced and complete, it's important for plant-based diets to have components of these various different food groups. So first we've got the whole grains. What's important with the whole grains is you want to have much of the grain kernel nutrients, which adds to the flavor, that are primarily focused in the bran and the germ of the grain. You routinely see those stripped out with a lot of your processed, grains like white flour. And whole grains are a lot healthier when they don't remove that aspect of it. And so when you still have those incorporated within the grain, it provides more fiber, more protein, and just more levels of essential nutrients. Now going through legumes and beans, which is another important food group. These are most concentrated natural sources of plant-based protein. You'll want to make sure that you're getting an adequate amount of plant-based diets. So try to have legumes or beans at each and every meal, especially if you're 100% plant-based. For example, a cup of black beans has around 230 calories and 15 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, and 15 grams of fiber. So that's a lot of protein that you're getting just from 1 cup of black beans. Whereas with nuts and seeds, they also contain a lot of protein, but not quite as much as legumes. And they tend to be a little bit more fattier, which is why it's recommended usually having a handful, but a little with nuts and seeds can go a long way. For example, a cup of mixed nuts can have about 24 grams of protein, but also 70 grams of fat and 12 grams of fiber. And also it would be 810 calories. So you will get more calories with nuts and seeds, but they're also healthy fats. But moderation, I think, when incorporating those and work with those in your diet. And then lastly, onto, oh, well, not lastly, but fruits and vegetables. As we know, they're essential. They provide nutrients, minerals, antioxidants, fibers, and are just, according to dietary guidelines, most adults need at least 2 cups of fruit per day, as well as 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per day. So lastly, I'd love to highlight just herbs and spices. Of course, you always want to watch out for sodium intake when working with herbs and spices, but when you are shopping at the grocery store and you're down the seasoning aisle, you'll see it on the back if you're having turmeric or if it's turmeric with salt and many of those other things. It should just say turmeric, or it should just say, you should be able to easily read the label and understand what you're using. And that shouldn't deter you from using herbs and spices because they actually have a ton of antioxidants, which are really good for you. And a lot of these herbs are like anti-inflammatory, so there's plenty of health benefits to them. And it's good to remember that there's plenty of alternatives too than just using salt. A lot of the instructors, we like to say that lemon is the new salt, and caper and olives go a long way as like salt substitutes. So there are just many health benefits of a plant-based diet. You see a lower risk of heart disease, lower risk of premature death, lower risk of obesity, cancers. It's more environmentally sustainable, healthier gut microbiome. So many of benefits to it. And I think it's just great to showcase these various ways that you can incorporate more into your food practices. So what's the importance of sharing traditional meals for modern health? Eating healthy foods benefits everyone at the table. Families come together, kids benefit physically, mentally, emotionally. Happy couples, happy eating practices. Parents can connect with their children when having these meals together. Friends grow older together because they're eating healthier, so you're hoping to live longer. And of course, just sharing faith, healthy foods at events, it just brings the community together. So it's really good that we still foster these moments and times to share food with loved ones. And, it just in general connects us all with our our bodies and our lifestyle. So it's just really good to these have these options out there and really just take that important to think about mindfulness eating when you're at the table or at your healing table. So this quote here was from Bryant Terry. He's a really cool cookbook author. He's got a book called Black Food, Afro-Vegan, Vegetable Kingdom. Those are just to name a few. He essentially gave us a great shout out because he's been connected with Oldways for years. Just talking about the significance of culturally appropriate food for health, especially for individuals of African descent. He likes that our program highlights the value of traditional African foodways, and we continue to advocate for incorporating African and African diasporic ingredients and cooking techniques within the daily diets. Terry also, just gave this thoughtful acknowledgement to Oldways in promoting this creation of our African heritage and health food pyramid, and the way that it encourages consumption for culturally relevant foods and moves away from generic dietary guidelines. So that's mostly what the quote tells about. But he's really awesome. And if you haven't checked out any of his books or are interested in learning more about just Afro-vegan, African-American foodways, but within this plant-based landscape. I definitely recommend some of his books. They're awesome. And these are just some of our resources. Like I said, you see our Sankofa bird there. That's just for the children's curriculum. This is what our Latin American heritage curriculum looks like. This is our adult African heritage. And then we also have an e-course too. So during the whole month of February, we've also got a special on the e-course, so anyone can take it. I think it's like $5 off that we're doing as our special. Excuse me. And then this is one of our complimentary resources that we have through the website too. It's our African Heritage Power Plate. And this year, I think it's celebrating its I want to say it's the 10-year anniversary. Yeah, we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary this February this year. So it's available through our website too, but it was great because it was in collaboration with some of our African Heritage and Health ambassadors. So, and in connection with the Physicians Committee too. So it's a really cool resource. I recommend you check it out. As far as time-wise, I don't want to go over too much, but when you're thinking of offering these type of classes, you want to think of accessibility and, just being culturally appropriate when offering these classes throughout the community. So one thing that we definitely like to focus within the program is all of our Heritage Diets programs, but making sure that they're accessible and affordable ingredients. So we have the canned options, but we also have the fresh options or the dried options too. And you'll see that within the recipes, and we'll talk about ways that you can save on ingredients. Some of our partners are, wide as far as the variety. We have some community farms and some nonprofits and universities. So I think it's just really great that this curriculum is very adaptable to many different types of partners and facilities, and making sure that we continue to keep it that way and make it accessible and affordable is a big deal to us too. So our prices haven't changed in years and we don't plan on doing it. So yes, James, I don't want to take too much of your time. I feel like we're going over, but why don't you share this video if you want to with your student?
I will do that. And we
Okay.
are just out of time, but if you want to send that to me, I would be more than happy to share it with the rest of students. I want to squeak in two quick questions. One, if students have questions, maybe I can get them from them, and you and I can kind of connect on those questions, and I can bring that back to students. But I did want to ask you to tell us all about the offerings that you have of instructors that you have peppered across the country that teach some of these classes in this curriculum that you offer. And if students wanted to plug into that and find out more about that, how can they do that?
Yeah, so actually I have these QR codes here. So if you're interested in learning more about the classes, maybe some that are happening in your area, or even becoming an instructor, because you can become an instructor. We have complimentary teachers training and can walk you through the process, because we work with many different areas. In certain areas, they don't have access to this sort of information. So we think it's really cool of providing this training and resources. Therefore, it can empower within the community, provide opportunities within the community, instead of us just saying, here's a teacher. It's like, there's a local community member out there that would love this opportunity. So we have that available on our website. And there's the QR code to learn more. And then also for the e-course, if you're just like, I just want to learn more about the class, or I just want to participate in a class series, but I have a really weird schedule and like I'm just not sure I'll be able to get there in time, or I just need my own time. We have a self-paced e-course, and this was actually filmed by our ambassadors, program ambassadors through the African Heritage and Health Program. And so that's available. It's through a third-party site. I believe it's called Thinkific, but right now we've got a deal going on for Black History Month. So you'll just want to use that code BHM 2025 during checkout, and you'll get $5 off. But those are two ways that you can engage with the curriculum. You can become a teacher, you can participate. So there's many opportunities there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah. You're amazing. We'll be talking.
Absolutely. This was so fun. I appreciate it. I hope you have
All
a
right,
good rest
take
of your
care.
day.
All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.